that having sent out loaves and fishes, they get cranberry pies back. So, Mike, here we are once again in the garden.
Beautiful.
Almost 2 metres apart.
Almost. It's good enough.
Careful not to breathe over each other. So, this Sunday we have the feeding of the 5,000, Matthew's account. Which is, the interesting thing, I hadn't realised this until I was reading something about it a little while ago. It's the only miracle that appears in all 4 Gospels.
Absolutely. And really fascinating the way the different Gospel writers handle it, with different emphases.
Which you are now going to explain to us, are you?
Well, no, I'm just going to focus on Matthew, I think, as it's the one that we're looking at in this year's lectionary. But before getting into that, or as a way into that, one of the things I'm reading at the moment is the life and times of Saint Seraphim, a great Russian saint from the late 18th, early 19th century. And he was a great ascetic and spent years in a hermitage in the forest. And people used to go and see him. And some people, when they were given food by him in the forest, like an onion, said, "Never tasted an onion like it ever." Somebody was given raspberries and said the same. Somebody was given a crust and said, "This is fantastic.
The best crust I've ever had."
Yeah, that's right. They were saying these things, which, you know, you kind of think, is this a bit of hagiography? And there's part of me that thinks if I was going all the way into the forest, I'd keep a turkey and cranberry pie up my sleeve in case I got a bit peckish. But I suspect if I did, then the onion wouldn't taste quite the same as a result.
Right. Can't imagine eating just an onion. But...
Anyway, but this is a way into the dynamic of, you know, how you turn scarcity into abundance. Yeah. Now, with the loaves and the fishes, one explanation of what's happening with the loaves and the fishes is the non-miraculous explanation that Jesus takes the loaves and the fishes that he can find, or that people are willing to give him, and he says grace over them. And this so touches the people that when he hands round the basket to all the people, instead of taking these 5 loaves and fishes, what they do is they chuck in their sandwiches, you know. So the turkey and cranberry pie is no longer up my sleeve, but it's on the plate. And that actually this amazingly feeds everybody, and they find that they have 12 baskets at the end, which is a very kind of neat way of avoiding anything miraculous.
And presumably they're not perturbed by the fact that having sent out loaves and fishes, they get cranberry pies back.
But as you can tell from the way I have stated it, I'm not entirely impressed by this argument. Because it's not what the text says.
No.
It doesn't say that this is what happened, and the miraculous nature of it is emphasised in different ways across the 4 Gospels. But what is intriguing to me is some of the things that are said during the course of this miracle. So, for instance, Jesus says to the disciples, don't send them away when they want to send them away to go and buy food at Tesco or whatever. Don't send them away, you give them something. So in other words, if we take this as contemporary as well as ancient, there is something here that Jesus is saying to us about offering, and our offering. And then, when it is offered, when they do come up with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, paltry as it is, he says, bring them to me. Bring them to me. So there's a dynamic here that we have to actually give here, but in a way that allows Jesus to take it up and to amplify and enable that to be enough. And I notice that it's not as if the person giving it ends up with a banquet. You know, the people who are giving the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes have enough too. But the feast is that everybody gets to have enough as we join in with this. And the fundamental thing underlying it, of course, is it's not really about bread, or rather it's about our eyes being led from the beam of light shining on the bread to Jesus himself. And actually what we're doing here is participating in his way and feeding on him who is the true bread. So that's where I was with it. Where were you?
So, well, unhelpfully, as you were speaking, what came back into my mind was, I think it was a Monty Python sketch, which was my brief memory of this was Jesus's landlady was being interviewed,
Right.
and because he was a fairly demanding tenant, lodger. And she tells the story of the day when one of his friends came scurrying down the hill and out of breath said, no, he wants sandwiches for 5,000. I think one of the things that strikes me when you read Matthew's Gospel, there is sort of permeating the Gospel. There is a narrative about the church. Which gets very clear later on when it's quite explicit about that. But that narrative is permeating these stories, and some of the twists, the variations in the telling of the stories, kind of points to the church or Matthew's understanding of the church, and presumably the experience of the church community of which he was a part. And so what I was reflecting on was that what happens here, you've got people, a great number of people, in a place of scarcity, as you was referring early on. And Jesus gives us all we need, even though we experience it as a place of scarcity. So I think about the situation we are in now. You and I have just had a meeting about how do we address the devastating impact on the church's finances of COVID-19. So we feel like we're in a place of scarcity. What light does this miracle cast on us? Cast for us. First of all, that what little we have is sufficient. But secondly, and this was the key that struck me, and I hadn't really thought about it before. What does Jesus do? Jesus does not sort of somehow magically create loaves and fishes for everybody, that it doesn't suddenly appear in their hands. He takes that little that has been offered, and then through the agency of the disciples, everybody gets to have enough. And so I'm thinking about Matthew and the church, it's through the ministry of the disciples, of those who are called into ministry, through that ministry, whoever it is who's exercising it, that everybody actually has enough. So I'm struck, in the time that we're in at the moment, for the great host and variety of ministries that people are called into, God has given us enough to respond with abundance in this situation that we're in. And it may seem incredibly challenging, and it is incredibly challenging, as it was for those disciples when they said, how on earth are we going to do this with just a few loaves and fishes? And somehow, by being faithful in sharing what we have, then that's blessed, and there is abundance. And I'm careful not to be sort of wandering into kind of wishful thinking or even magical thinking, but there is something about faithfulness in this and ministry that God blesses.
Last point from me, the other throwaway line in this is he had compassion on the crowds. Interestingly, Karl Barth, one of the greatest 20th century theologians, took 4 pieces from the Gospels to elaborate on Jesus' love for us. And one of them was that phrase, Jesus had compassion on the crowds, which is a pretty unusual expression, because who last had compassion on the crowds?
Yeah.
But Jesus does, and the ministry here is being taken up into that compassion.
Absolutely.
In our service, participating in his feeding of them. So,
and it's an outward act, isn't it? It's not the disciples serving themselves. Oh, thank goodness for that. We've got 5 loaves and 3 fishes, or whatever it was, to share amongst us. It was out to the crowd.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.